Join me for a very deep, intense, and powerful conversation with playwright June Carryl about her play Blue. She says, "When George Floyd died, I knew there would be a play. Then January the 6th happened, and I knew what that play was." Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here.
So, June, first and foremost, I'd like to ask my guests in a nutshell, in a peanut shell, or a crab shell, who is June Carryl?
In a nutshell. I'm a playwright and an actor and a screenwriter. Um, Grew up in Denver. My mother was Guyanese. My father
Guyanese?
was from, yeah, exactly. And my father was from Democratic Republic of Congo. I was supposed to be a lawyer and ended up being an actor and a writer instead.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. That's an interesting sort of, I would say, divergence to what you're doing now.
Yeah.
But what you're doing now is so powerful on so many levels. So we're going to talk about Blue for the purpose of this interview. So just can you just give us a brief, an overview of Blue, and then we're going to start to dissect it.
Yeah, yeah. So, Blue is a conversation between a white male officer who's been on the force 29 years, who has been involved in the shooting of an unarmed black motorist at a traffic stop, and uh, someone who turns out to be have been a friend, the wife of his former partner, who is now the uh, detective investigating the incident. Yeah, it's yeah, so it's a conversation about, for me, about race, it's about power, it's about
Mhm.
authoritarianism, it's about history. Yeah.
And would you say that writing this play was triggered by the circumstances around the death of George Floyd? Um, maybe it contributed to, because I believe, like you said, it was about history. So, what
Yeah.
made you decide to pen this at that time?
Yeah, well, I knew there was going to be a play when George Floyd was murdered. I knew that. I didn't know what that would be, but then the riot at the US Capitol happened, and I was like, that's what it is.
Mm,
That intersection between um perceived loss of power and the attempt to hold on to that power, which is, I think, endemic to at least American policing.
mm,
Um, I still have the image of the man who murdered George Floyd just staring at the camera with that blase sort of so what look on his
mm,
face. And, you know, tired of being tired, you know, I wrote my poem, my angry poem, and I published that, published it. I put it up on Instagram. And then thought there has to be a play about this. There are going to be plays about this. There needs to be discussion about this. But then that riot happened, and I was like, there's this pretense
mm,
that the world is slipping away from these people. Really, it's a bunch of people who are mad that they didn't get their way and who are willing to kill to get their way. I think that people who argue that the kind of person who believed that the election was stolen from Donald Trump uh, uh, is prone to, uh, is vulnerable. And I don't think that that's the case. I think these are people who, while I understand that the world has gotten bigger and so they feel their grip on power, exclusive power, slipping, the world's not going anywhere for them. And I get, I try to be understanding, but end up feeling angry all over again every time I think about it. You know, the with this idea that something's being taken from them. I get so angry about it, and people keep dying because of it, you know? Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
No, no,
go on a
no.
soapbox.
That's okay because I can see where it took you. And is part of that anger maybe the way they went about things to create havoc, to create this distraction, to you repeated something twice there in terms of they feel that something was taken away from them. And I guess historically, that's what's been happening anyway. So it feels this is what I'm picking up, and we'll try and
Just
keep
saying. I'm just saying.
yeah.
It's like it's a little bit of the shoes on the other foot. There's this idea that, well, so there's, the whole cis white Christian male angst
Mm,
uh is to me a it's kind of this prank, because it's not based on facts. The
mm,
facts are that even with these few crumbs being spread out on the table, they still run the game.
mm,
And I think that the to bring it back to Blue,
mm-hmm,
the kind of person who, to my mind, more often than not, is attracted to policing, statistically, is as likely to be a criminal as he is a cop. He or she is a cop. That's actually statistically, that's actually a statistic.
mm-hmm,
Psychologically, the makeup is very much the same. These are people who want power, and who you give them power plus a gun and no accountability, somebody's going to die.
mm,
You found an institution like American policing on the slave, um, not the slave traders, but the ones who went after runaway slaves.
oh,
Those
okay,
became the police. Their
okay,
whole job was to bring back runaway slaves. You put that kind of control in someone's hand over another person's life, someone's going to die.
mm,
And the policing has shaped itself around that very ugly nucleus. Um, and so these you get this just perfect storm of a sense of powerlessness, a perceived, I will say, sense of powerlessness. I can't say, I have to say perceived, because I'm not trying to completely dehumanize them, but
yes,
a perceived sense of powerlessness with the opportunity to get back some of their own. Perfect storm. And then, a guy who can't handle a gun will run up on a 12-year-old boy pretending to play cops and robbers and shoot him without even asking what's going on. Will, you know, battle with a 14-year-old at night just because the kid's wearing a hoodie and shoot him and get away with it. Will And the thing is, it doesn't it the thing is, it's not just white officers, because there is a unfortunately, one of the people who died this past year at the hands of the police was actually killed by a group of black officers
yes,
who are raised raised in that same environment, where they're told your job your job is literally just to make it home at night. Everyone is out to get you. They're all bad and they're all your enemy. That's the narrative that they're fed in
mm,
order to promote their survival. And you take a system, you're raised in a system where you have no power, and suddenly you get a gun and you get
mm,
this authority, black or white. If your thirst, I should say, is for power, someone is going to die. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Um, yeah, I don't, yeah.
and it's interesting because you can tell that it's something that's very deep I won't say passionate because this isn't about passion. It goes beyond passion. But the way that you portrayed that in Blue, the intensity of, because initially you said Blue was about discussion, dialogue. And what I found interesting, and we'll come to the actor who played the detective, who shot the young man. It was just interesting because as much as what you say now about the situation why you did Blue, towards the end, you you opened up the play in such a way where we were able to look into the space of both characters and how they had both been affected or infected by what happened. And I thought that was quite clever. So you walked in sort of with an idea, okay, this is going to be sort of like it's about black against, white against black, but it was much deeper because as the dialogue went on in that 60-minute stint, you got to observe not just the individual themselves as individuals, and then as in the capacity of their profession, but then their humanity and then their vulnerability. So you kept on expanding it out. And it was, and I love the way you your portrayal was very, very deep and connected to all those different emotions,
Thank you.
you know,
Thank you.
and so for me, I sat back and was like, wow, because whether we, um, whether we believed in the reasoning on both sides, we were given the opportunity to understand. And it didn't make it right or wrong, but we were able to understand.
That makes me so happy. That makes me really happy. We had a lot of discussions, the director and the other actor and I, about the relationship, that it was important that it be a relationship, because on the face of it, it really is pretty simple. It is pretty black and white,
Literally.
but literally.
Yeah.
But I think that the what's important is nobody gets out unscathed. Nobody gets out unscathed because you are talking about human beings. And so the things that they're depending on each other to see in them and value in them and then discover don't actually matter, or
Mm,
don't weigh as much as their own of this some other thing. I think that's a really I don't know, I just think it's important to to see how people break apart,
yes.
you know, how people break apart and how people break each other.
Hmm.
Um,
From their own place of, they say hurt people.
mm-hmm.
you know, what I saw from both sides was, we're in this environment and we know that every day you're going out there, you're having to face the world, but you're having to face the world you're having to face sometimes the worst aspects of the
Yeah,
world. And
yeah,
so where do I go? I'm doing my best. And that's what I got from, what was the gentleman's name that played him? I do apologize.
yeah. John Colella, yeah,
Yeah, he was
yeah,
very powerful. And that's why I said the synergy between the both of you is very powerful because when I watched him as well, it was almost like I'm doing my best. Um, I'm supporting the flag. I did my best, and he kept on saying, he repeated that very often. I'm doing my best. Like I'm
yeah.
doing my job. And yet, when you started to face him with all this evidence, then you could see his humanity being broken down, and yet he was still trying to, you know, I'm a patriot. I'm doing my job. And it was being broken down, but he was fighting because on some level, that representation had become him.
Become him, yeah, exactly, exactly. You yeah. Um, I, I think that that's the thing about John. His work is very visceral and very it's not acting, It's just he's just in it.
And that's right. Yeah.
And I think that the I think that's what makes the character so human. That the guy playing him is just, you want to love him, and then you realize, oh, but then you kind of like him again, but then and then you kind of you're mad at him, but then it's like, oh, he got you because he's kind of funny. And I mean, I think that's it was a gift when Michael, the director, was like, that's who I want for Sully. I was like,
Mm.
yeah, okay, yeah, because it's
And
just,
did you hit it off? Did you two hit it off?
yeah.
Um, yeah, you can see the synergy that sorry, I butted in.
No, please go ahead.
You can sense, not you can see, but you can also sense that synergy. I mean, acting is acting, and you are presenting yourself through someone else's world, but then there's synergy which adds and compounds to that, and so you've got the story, and then you've got the synergy, and because I'm a Sagittarian, and I sometimes I get bored quickly, but I was like, oh, 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 bang. And sometimes also it drew reflection to my own life, or sometimes my own interaction with others, and the filters that we see through, the perception that
Yeah,
we see through life. And
yeah,
and I guess fundamentally what I also took away was that place of healing. I can get a bit deep there, but how do we how do we heal those wounds that allow us to perceive the world in a certain way where the anger the anger is what we speak, or what we, the anger and the pain.
yeah.
Where do we put that? How can we place that?
It's such a good question because I don't know. Like I during the aftermath of what happened to George Floyd, I had a friend who, and I say that past tense specifically because in the aftermath, he was, posting all of this really woke stuff. He never said a word to me, not a single word or never even asked if I was okay. And he sort of reappeared in my life. And this is not too long after what had happened, as though nothing had happened. And I just was livid with him. And it's taken a long time to get past that anger, that my hurt didn't merit even an "Are you okay?" And I think that where the United States is in particular is there are a lot of people walking around who are not okay. And there are people walking around who feel bad that they're not okay, but who aren't
Don't know where to go with it.
able to bridge the gap, because it means being accountable. It means maybe running the risk of being the one who did say the insensitive thing that one time to that one person all the way back then. And then on the other side, it's the same thing for us,
Mm.
being hyper vigilant because you live in a society where this means you are suspect first, you are last hired, first fired, you are seen as less intelligent just because you just because of this. And so you walk through the world with your hands up like this, and somebody comes along who really does just mean well, and you're like, bat, 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 bat. And I don't really know how we get to the next part, which is the healing part. I think we're starting. I think the blessing and the curse of that tape is that, like the Rodney King beating, Black people had been saying, this is happening to us, and it's
Mm.
happening to us all the time. And there was, if we weren't outright disbelieved, there was, well, what did he do to deserve it?
Mm.
Now, with indisputable evidence, even with indisputable evidence, he didn't do anything.
Mm.
There's still the crowd that is like, well, what did he do before this? Well, what about the thing where he, and So there are those people who will never really reach. But for people who are actually trying to have those hard conversations about what it means to have privilege, simply because you don't look like this,
Mm.
you know, and we don't need the guilt, we don't need the upset. I don't need you to have your feelings hurt because you're white. I don't need that. I don't want that. I'm not asking for that. I don't need you to apologize for being white. What I need is for you to recognize the privilege that you have, because an entire world is built with you in mind and not me.
Wow.
And I think that healing starts not with, oh, I'm sorry and mea culpa and self-flagellate. That doesn't help anyone. But if we can start with a recognition that we're not on a level playing field, and then if we can next allow those of us on the downside of the seesaw to feel our feelings, and if we can believe people on the downside of the seesaw when they say how it feels, I think one of the things that's fascinating, I think, about Western culture is that it's US culture in particular, it's very nostalgic. I used to say, like in the 90s, we started recycling revelations myths. We were going to get so close, the world was going to fall apart, and then the savior would come along, or the second coming would come, and it would often, and Arnold Schwarzenegger did it, and Rosanna Arquette did it, and everybody's got an end of the world story.
Mm.
We get to the end of the world,
And
and nothing changes. But we cycle this, we're good for cycling backward, because at the end, we don't really want to change. Americans in particular don't necessarily want to change. Things like George Floyd come along and say, break the whole thing open and say, well, revelations are not, you have to change.
can I present this to you?
Yeah.
Because then with the healing, you spoke about, you're not sure, because things take a long time. And what also if it were to start with, everybody starts in their own way, because it's interesting. I had this conversation around something similar to this, in that if you're brought up being told a certain thing from the time you're between 0 and 7, that becomes you. And sometimes you don't even realize that. I remember at the time there was a friend of mine, and she was saying, one of her friends, white friends, had said, what can I do? And she goes, I was angry with her. And I said, but you have to understand, sometimes they don't know what to do, because they're from a different era, and so they're trying to understand what this is, and sometimes they've not been aware of it because it's not their world.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's understanding that on both sides, and I'm just presenting this on both sides. And that's why when at the end of the play, it brought it back, that understanding that both sides, if you are brought up with a certain narrative and a certain indoctrination, that's all you know.
Oh, you know.
And then you go out into the world as you go older, and that's what you perceive the world to be. And whether, you can take that away from color. I could be a woman and I'm being brought up with certain narratives about men, women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what I loved about the play, where at the end, you both, it's almost like you stood there, and it's almost, I can see all this realization, pouring through you from your own, as being the actress, but I can see the different realizations of that dialogue with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't know what you don't know.
That's
You
right.
just don't. And I think that the world is certainly built in a way that we tend to believe some narratives more than we believe others, but it doesn't make those primary narratives, I would call them, less difficult to get out of, less real, So I think you're right. I think part of it is, as much as we want to, I think it starts with really genuinely believing people wherever they're from, whoever people tell you they are, believe them.
That's what Dr. Maya Angelou said. Yes.
You know?
Show you.
And sometimes people are genuinely trying, they just don't know. And they don't know what to do because they've never had to know what to do. They don't think about it because they've never had to think about it.
That's
The
right.
ones who want to think about it, you talk to them. Healing starts with just coming into those spaces where the two or however many of you believe one another and believe in one another.
And you have that dialogue that can then strip away, but then it builds up. But the initial
Yeah,
is to have the dialogue, and sometimes that's the most difficult thing to do, to step into a conversation, an honest,
terrifying.
open, raw conversation that's not just about the here and now, but it has its layers.
Yeah.
So bringing it, so in terms of Blue, I mean, I know the reviews have been incredible in terms of how powerful it is, and um it's hope, I believe in the background, it's opened up lots of different dialogues in those spaces. So how has it been for you though, in terms of the reviews and just performing in the UK, and then are you bringing Blue back to the UK at any time?
Um, it's been a magical journey, really has been wonderful. And the number of conversations I've gotten to have has been it's just been so good for my heart, because it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. There are lots of people who are having the same issue and they have the same questions that I do, and we can all talk about it together because none of us knows what to do. Okay, I'm not alone. That's been so heartening, so good for my heart, and encouraging and exciting. I I don't know what happens to Blue next. I want to take it to New York.
Mm,
Um, the woman who originated the role in Los Angeles, her name is Jalan Shahada Hill, and she's just fire. And I want the show to go to New York with her and John, and just go back to being the playwright. And I I would like to come back. I would,
mm,
because this has been such an incredibly wonderful ride. I mean, London's phenomenal, and um, I got to go to a couple of different places outside of London and see, I got to go to Croydon, and that was really cool. And it was just like, wow, okay, you know, it was um, it was very different,
Croydon, yeah.
and
Road, yeah. Croydon's, yeah, it's an interesting place.
it's an interesting place. And I mean, I understand the narrative that is sort of cropping up in Croydon, but for me, it was along with that, the more, I don't know, challenging parts was just all those Black and brown people. You don't realize until you're away from it how
Mm,
much it means to be in a place. And it's why, I know people are upset about, blackout nights, but it's why people get upset. It's why people want it. It's like, because every so often you just want to be in a place where everybody kind of has the same, all kind of, yeah, we're coming, definitely all coming from very distinctly different places, emotionally, spiritually, mentally,
mm.
physically, historically, blah 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 blah. But there are certain general washes that kind of fit a number of people, and to all be in the same place, moving in the same direction for even that 5 minutes,
Mm.
just felt so good. Felt so
Good,
good.
good, 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 good. Um, I mean, and I guess sort of winding down, because this has been very deep and very rich. Working with John, I would, it would be nice to find out from him how his role impacted him. Maybe
Yeah.
opening up things for him as maybe a middle-aged white guy, if I may put it that way, presented that way, and playing this role, and maybe some of the realities that it opened up to him as well, because he played it so deeply and so real. Um, what's that?
He tends to get cast, at least by Michael, our director. He's done a he's done a few roles with him where he's been that guy.
That's what he
And
said.
it's
I spoke to him afterwards.
yeah, And I mean, I think he has an honesty about him, that he's not trying to pretend he's doesn't feel these things, or he just
dives into the role and
dives right into the role and doesn't judge the character, which is, I think, really important. It's important that you not judge your character. You know?
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, June, this has been such a, because I've wanted to, you know, capture this conversation with you. I know we were trying to do it before the show started in London, but it was actually good that I saw the show, because then I can draw on it, because it was so deep and so rich and so profound. So I just want to say thank you. And yeah, just looking to see what else is birthed through you. What next? What next?
I don't know, but I'll tell you when I find out.
You got my email. So June,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say I've been talking to June Carryl. She's the playwright for Blue. It actually comes to an end this Saturday, but do look out for it, you know, whether it's New York, LA, wherever it is, because it really is worth seeing. And you've got a few days left. Today is just Tuesday. So, you know, get on down to the Seven Dials Playhouse. Seven Dials Playhouse. It really is worth it. And June, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, Esther, thank you. Really.
Just stay there. I want to stop.